Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Carers World Radio Plus. In this edition of Carers World Live, we're focusing on the future of adult health and social care. No sign yet of the long-awaited government consultation green paper, but the Local Government Association has launched one of its own. We at Carers World Radio Plus have our own 3-question survey for you, and I'll be talking to leading experts in the field as we investigate what the future holds for adult health and social care. But above all, we want to hear from you. So here's a reminder of how to get in touch with us at Carers World Radio Plus, where your views are our news.
Carers World Radio Plus. Contacts. Call us on 0161 818 9068. 0161 818 9068. You can Facebook us at news@carersworldradio.com. Find us on Twitter at #news@carersworldrad. We're on Instagram too, CWRAD. And email us on carersworldradio.com.
My wife Kristin is just 47 years old, but has had multiple sclerosis for 17 years. Each year, as it inevitably progresses, it becomes a bigger aspect of our life together. I was caring for Kristin at home, but just 2 years ago this became too much and I collapsed under the strain. We had carers coming in morning and night to get Kristin in and out of bed, but all other hours of the day I was left to care for Kristin on my own. At the same time, I was trying to run my own business to supplement the modest carer's allowance I received. I got no respite and was exhausted. Kristin fell ill with a simple respiratory issue and got stuck in hospital for 3 months because she wasn't allowed to leave until a package of full-time care was in place. When she finally left hospital, she came home for 4 months until I collapsed from looking after her with no respite. She was then placed in an NHS-funded nursing home under the Continuing Healthcare Scheme. I think she could have come home full-time with the right care in place, or if the money being spent on her care home was invested in making the right adaptations to our home. Devastatingly, the council couldn't pay for all the changes we needed, and I couldn't fund it on a reduced income, so we had no choice. It's so hard for people who are not in our situation to understand the enormous impact this has had on our family. Kristin is the most important person in the world to me, and I still find it hard that instead of spending our lives together, she is left feeling isolated in a home where she is the youngest person by many years. I see her every day, but I miss her terribly and feel so guilty every time I leave her there. Before Kristin became ill, we had never considered that we might one day rely on carers, which terrifyingly made us realize this could happen to anyone, young or old. What is important is that we have a system that makes sure people get looked after in the way they want, because that's the very least we all deserve.
That's Glyn's story, and you're going to hear the stories of 3 other people this evening who are expressing the reality of health and social care in the UK in the year 2018. You're possibly familiar with the story. We'd certainly love to hear from you on social media, and we'll come again to the details of how you can contact us and also join in our very brief survey. If there's something you're listening to and thinking, well, it doesn't sound like what I've got to go through, without being too depressing, of course, life can change at any moment. On that, we move to a slightly lighter note and introduce our social media coordinator, April Morton, to the programme. Welcome, April.
Hi.
So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, well, perhaps so people can get used to the survey idea, perhaps you could do that first, then we'll go through the other social media, then come back again for the how to deal with the survey again.
Yeah, of course, we've got a great survey on. So if you go to www.menti.com, that's MENTI, and use the code 306216, and that was 6216, you'll be able to join in with our great survey, which is asking three really important questions. Who should fund social care? Who should be responsible for getting the best money for health and social care spending? And is it more important to reduce the national debt than increase spending on health and social care?
So we've already got some sort of response to it coming. We'll look at later and see how the breakdown is.
Yeah.
So what about the ordinary social media, if I may put it that way, for keeping in touch with?
Yeah, it's really good. If you want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch on Twitter at Carers World Radio Rad, or Facebook, which is CWR Rad, or Instagram, which is Carers Live World Radio. And you can private message us, or you can just sort of BM us over, or just sort of share and tag and comment in the comment section.
So we can't do this without you, so please get contacting us on social media. For the moment, April, thank you very much, and we'll be coming back and forth to you during the course of the next hour or so. Now on Carers World Radio Plus, you're listening to Carers World Live. Time for Tim Matthews in our newsroom.
Hello and welcome to Carers News. Looking after loved ones is dangerous to your health, the independent newspaper reports. It seems that millions of unpaid carers are putting their own health at risk as they look after loved ones, while the adult social care system edges closer to collapse, local councils have warned. Rising demand for care and the increasing cost of providing it is putting more pressure on families to look after loved ones, with many of the 5.7 million unpaid carers in England unable to take a break from their caring roles. This, according to the local government association, the LGA. Research shows that nearly 3/4 of carers in England have suffered stress and depression, while many have experienced physical ill health because of their caring role. The LGA put the cost of providing carers assessments at £150 million, which it said would be more cost-effective than having to pay for long-term social care and emergency hospital care. Law aimed to provide support for carers has failed to benefit the majority of unpaid carers in Wales. There are 370,000 carers in Wales, but research by Carers Wales shows the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act of 2014 has had limited impact on their lives. Only 3.5% of carers had a carers needs assessment, a core element of the Act. Under the Act, unpaid carers in Wales have equal rights for support as the people they look after, and it also placed a new set of duties on local authorities to meet carers' eligible needs, following a carers' needs assessment. Local authorities must also ensure that they have information, advice and assistance services in place, and clearly signposted so carers can get the right information at the right time. The Welsh Government said it's fully committed to a full evaluation of the Act. One in 5 of secondary school pupils is now a carer for a sick or disabled relative, reports the Mirror newspaper. A study by the Carers Trust suggests that 800,000 children aged between 11 and 16 in England are having to care for someone at home. In the poll, each child answered 18 questions about his or her role at home, ranging from washing up and cooking to managing household finances. Points were based on how often the tasks were completed. Of the 200 young carers in the sample, 177 responded fully about the level of care they gave. Just under a third showed them to be carrying out a high level of caring, with nearly 10% doing a very high level of caring. Giles Meyer, Chief Executive of the Carers Trust, said this is a monumental wake-up call for us all to take responsibility for these vulnerable children. Well, that's all for now. I'll be back in half an hour, so now over. This is the way you can vote. Use your phone, tablet or computer and type into the web browser . It's as simple as that. And thanks for taking part.
So there's some more details about how to take part in our survey. Incidentally, the survey will be running through the programme this evening, but we are going to be continuing it because we will be coming back. This is the first of a series of programmes on the subject of the future of adult health and social care. Hopefully in one of those we'll actually get the government's plans that have been waiting for over a year. It was promised last autumn. It's very cheering to think that apparently this autumn actually includes Christmas Eve. First mention of Christmas on Carers World Radio Plus in 2018, so we'll have no more of that. One of the leading experts in the field of adult health and social care is consultant physician and president of the British Geriatric Society, Dr. Eileen Burns. She's been sharing her thoughts and observations with me on the future of adult health and social care.
Users of the health service are older people.
Well, a little technical problem there with Eileen, who I spoke to a little earlier on, and while my producer Ron Critcher sorts that out a little bit, hopefully be able to bring you that in a moment. But just to give a chance to give you again the survey details, menti.com, the number 30 62 16. That's Menti, spelled MENTI.com. That's 30 62 16. Of course, you can always email us on news@carersworldradio.com. You can contact us on Twitter @carersworldrad, and by all other means on social media, Facebook and Instagram. Well, later on in the programme, we'll be hearing from Councillor Ian Hudspeth, who is the leader of Oxfordshire County Council and the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board for the Local Government Association. So, without further ado, let's see if we can hear from Dr. Eileen Burns. She's consultant physician and member of the British Geriatric Society. So actually, I've got a feeling we can't bring that to you now. Hopefully we'll be able to speak to her a little later on in the programme. But in the meantime, I've been talking on about social media and things. So perhaps April can join me at the moment and see how things are going.
Yes, hello. I will, yeah, great to tell you an update. We've had lots of people sort of hashtagging in, making sure that they're coming and being involved. Lots of people think that it should be both who fund social care, and it's really interesting that everyone's sort of getting behind and really wants to, yeah, see actually what should be happening in the future. We've also had some people sort of comment in saying that they really related to Glenn's story and that they go through similar experiences, and it's really nice to hear that, yeah, everyone's together and everyone's here. So yeah, keep them coming in because it's really important to get everyone involved and to hear your thoughts.
Exactly. You're listening to Carers World Radio Plus on Carers World Live, where your views are our news. Now, earlier on, April was referring to Glenn's story. Earlier on, we heard from Glenn. Let's hear now one of the other carer stories that we're featuring in this tonight's edition.
Partner running a B&B when I had a serious stroke and later 2 minor heart attacks. After 4 months in hospital, I was depressed, frail, and my memory and cognition had deteriorated. We knew I needed more support with daily living than my partner could provide. I was unable to return home, and it made me frightened about my future, with clinicians uncertain about my further recovery. I wanted to live locally so I could continue seeing my partner, and I miss my dogs. The Shared Lives scheme matched me with 2 trained and approved Shared Lives carers who shared my sense of humour, had dogs and lived close by. They helped me through it all. When I arrived at their home, I never dreamt of being so independent again. I couldn't walk down the drive. Now I can nip up to town. My shared lives carers helped me gain strength and confidence, walking a little bit further each time until I could walk independently again. They helped me adapt to my memory loss with strategies for managing money and banking and supported me to make meals and manage my diet. Since then, I have booked a holiday and travelled on my own. I'm very optimistic about life and planning a move into my own flat. Without the shared life scheme, I would have undoubtedly spent longer in hospital, had less choice about where I lived, and had a slower recovery. It is so important that money is available to ensure that schemes like this exist.
There we are, hearing from Steve with his story. So hopefully that struck a chord with you. And by all means, get in touch with us here on Carers World Radio Plus. And you can watch this programme, and indeed you can contact us via the website carersworldradio.com. All the contact details are there. Now, earlier on in the programme, I mentioned that the Local Government Association has launched its consultation paper. Indeed, it closes at midnight tonight, so it launched it a couple of months ago. I do know from the LGA, although I don't know numbers, the response has exceeded their expectations. So if you go onto the Local Government Association website, or in fact the link on our homepage just above the picture you're viewing this programme in effect. So later on we'll be having more news from Tim Matthews. We'll also be hopefully hearing from Peter Beresford, the social affairs expert, on the impact of the current situation on health and social care. But without further ado, let's move on to the next guest, Councillor Ian Hudspeth, who is the leader of Warwickshire County Council and chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board of the Local Government Association. He's their chief spokesperson. He started by telling me his reaction to the lack of a government green paper.
Well, I think that we agree with you. We will
At the moment, I get 3 short visits a day from a care worker to cook my meals, help me shower and keep the house clean. I get 2 hours every 2 weeks, social time, which at best on a good day gets me over to the park and back. It's not long enough to join in any activities, but I value this time hugely as it's uninterrupted time with actual real conversation, not just what do you need to eat or similar. My basic needs are met, I'm clean and I'm fed, but I haven't got enough support to actually get me out of the house. It means that some days I barely get to speak to anyone, let alone have a social life. If I get an infection and have to ask my carer to pick up a prescription, I don't get to have a shower that day. There just isn't enough time. A little more support, for example, a support worker to go with me to new places would give me so much more opportunity to take part in life. But at the moment that feels like an impossible utopia. People like me who are professionals and could make a contribution with the right support are being cut out of the workforce. Working in an office or a hospital isn't really possible for me, but I still have skills and experience that I would like to use if I had the means of doing so. In the end, it is a question of equality. I don't feel like I'm living, just existing.
Yet another harsh reality of life as it is in 2018 in the matter of adult health and social care. We were hoping to speak to Care England this evening, but their representative, Professor Martin Green, was unable to join us, but he did say the following to us. And just so that you know, Care England are the largest representative body for independent providers of adult social care. They've responded to the Local Government Association's paper on social care. They say it's a helpful exercise in rehearsing the expectations of a reformed and sustainable care system that delivers high-quality personalised care and empowers the individual while looking ahead to the government's long-promised Green Paper. Professor Martin Green, Chief Executive of Care England, went on to say, whilst we welcome this initiative, the instability of the care market carries on unchecked. The government must address the urgency of the care crisis, as otherwise all the promises of the Green Paper become rather academic. Care England's analysis shows that councils are struggling, with 37% unable to use their adult social care precept option until next year. And 1 in 5 councils who told us about their fee levels, that's told Care England, gave no inflation rise to prices paid for nursing care home placements in the current year of 2018-19. That's the thoughts of Professor Martin Green, OBE, Chief Executive of Care England. Now, a few moments ago, we were trying to hear the thoughts of Councillor Ian Hudspeth, the leader of Oxfordshire County Council and chair of the Health and Social Care Wellbeing Board for the Local Government Association. He started by explaining his reaction to the lack of a government green paper. Well, as you can gather, we're having a few technical problems this evening with some of the interviews that we've already been working on. So if you could just bear with us for a few minutes, we'll be back with you as soon as possible here on Carers World Live, on Carers World Radio Plus, where your views are our news. Thanks for bearing with us. Very kind of you to wait, and it's really appreciated. You're listening to Carers World Live on Carers World Radio Plus, where your views are our news. At least that's what we'd hope so. Anyway, hopefully all technical problems have now been resolved and we're able to listen to the views of Councillor Ian Hudspeth, leader of Warwickshire County Council. He's also the chair of the Health and Social Care Wellbeing Board for the Local Government Association. His initial concern, like all of us, and certainly you and your homes as well, is that there's a lack of the government's long-promised green paper. Here's what he thinks about that.
Well, I think that we agree with you. We were waiting with bated breath for the sort of government's proposal to come forward as well. And we decided in July to publish our own green paper and to then actually collate the consultation so that we can actually present it back to government in a sort of a white paper. The main issue for us is to make sure that people understand exactly what social care is and how it influences national health as well. And I think there's a lot of confusion about social care. People don't understand exactly what it is, who pays for it, and more importantly, why they pay for it. So we pose some questions that we hope people will be able to sort of come back on, because the main thing about it is that if we're going to have a 10-year NHS plan, it's important to have an idea of exactly what's happening in social care as well. So we're asking the questions, some of which towards the end are asking how people think social care should be funded. Should it be funded through a national levy? Should it be funded by individuals? And it's just trying to get people to understand exactly what it is. For instance, one of the questions is, what's the role of individuals and families in supporting people's well-being? It's about trying to drill down and help people understand what actually happens with social care.
How much is it, do you think, that, like other problems in society or other issues in society, people don't really respond these days until it directly affects them? Like, for example, they may have an elderly relative who suddenly goes into a care home, over a very short period of time.
I think that's very true, and I think that most of people's interaction with councils tends to be on planning matters or rubbish collection or highways issues, and that's what people understand councils are. But over 50% of funding is now for social care, and the Barnett graph of doom would predict that by sort of 2025 there's going to be a situation where virtually all money is going to go to social care. And I think there's a lack of understanding of exactly who's paying for it, i.e. local government, and if local government is paying for it, who actually is receiving the benefit. Because, for instance, in Oxfordshire, just 2% of the population are in receipt and having very good funding for them. But that's a small proportion of the residents, and of course other people, as you rightly say, aren't aware of who funds social care, and it's not until you get into those intricacies exactly what you mean. And even then, there's an issue about how much people retain. It's means tested, and it depends on whether people are having care at home or whether they're going into residential care as well. And it's a very complicated system, and I think we actually need to simplify it to make sure people understand exactly what it means.
The government seem to be very clear about who's responsible for all this, and it's the local authorities. I mean, what's your message back to government about this, in anticipation of, obviously, you've got to spend a bit of time working out the results of your consultation, but what would your message to them be now, right at this moment?
Well, our message back to government is, yes, we are prepared to accept that it is our responsibility, and if it is our responsibility, we've got to be able to make sure it's fully funded and that it's not impacting on other services as well. So that over the recent years, we've had the Better Care Fund coming out, which is with the National Health Service as well, but we've had to sort of work with our National Health colleagues to actually make sure that the funding goes into social care. And if governments are going to give additional funds, then it should be coming direct down to the councils providing the care, rather than being caught up in the rest of the system. We've also had the adult social care precept for the last couple of years, which has been very welcome because it's been provided additional funds that we have to put into adult social care, and we've been doing that. But there is a problem, because by 2025 there could be an overall funding gap of around 7.8 billion for councils, which is really a major issue. And how are we going to address that problem, and what would it mean for services, not just for adult social care, but other valuable services people appreciate?
We're also running a short survey at Carers World Radio Plus, see what our audience think on 3 key issues. And one of the questions is, who should fund social care? And the results so far seem to favour a mixture of private and taxpayers' money. Would that not then solve that shortfall that you've just described if private money was to be involved?
It certainly is. Well, at the moment, a lot of private money is used to fund social care. If you have assets above 23,000 and you're in a residential care home, then actually you are funding it yourself, and that is the private funding. Now, if we're talking about a private insurance policy, again, we have to be clear about who actually receives the money and where the top-up is. So I think these are the sort of questions we've got to ask. It's interesting that your listeners are coming back and saying that it should be funded from a mixture. We are content to carry on providing good services and providing good social care, but the important thing is how best to deliver that, and working particularly with the National Health Service, who benefit because, of course, as people have good social care, they don't need to go into hospital, and we should be looking at how the whole system approach.
On the second question in our survey, who should be responsible for getting best value for money on health and social care spending, basically we have a pretty consistent picture that they're looking to a mixture of national government and local councils. I assume you'd be pleased to hear that they have some faith in local authorities.
I think that it's good that people understand that local authorities have been providing good value for money. Since 2010, we've had a massive reduction in funding, totaling over sort of £16 billion, yet we're still
Right, we're clearly having some technical issues still tonight. I really do apologise for that, and I'm grateful to you for your understanding. Let's rejoin Ian Hudspeth and hear the rest of what he has to say. Just making sure we've got our computer file. It's wonderful, isn't it? New technology. I prefer old technology. I'm old enough to remember reel-to-reel tape, cart machines. Personally, I'd put in a bid for all that and leave technology to its own devices. In fact, it raised a serious issue that some of our viewers think that there's too much reliance on new technology. Maybe that's a subject we should be looking at. It obviously, it's good news for us because it means you can communicate in all sorts of ways that you couldn't in the old days, if you like, because you'd actually have to dial the phone. But anyway, do keep in touch. You're listening to Carers World Live on carersworldradio.com, where your views are our news. So let's go back to Councillor Ian Hudspeth from the LGA and see the rest of what he has to say.
In different areas, even within, say, the southeast of England, different localities have different markets. So having a national service is actually a bit too prescriptive, and giving the flexibility so local solutions can be provided is really good. And I think that's something we would be looking at, working with our national health colleagues to see if we can actually identify savings and preventing people going into hospital, or preventing people staying in hospital for a longer period of time. And then if we can use those savings to make more preventative savings, it improves everybody's life chances and overall gives everybody a better well-being, which is important.
Just a final couple of questions. The last item in our survey is it more important to reduce the national debt than increase spending on health and social care? We've had a resounding it's more important to increase spending on health and social care, so no surprises there. I mean, that's perhaps a more matter of political ideology, but I'd be interested in whatever thoughts you can add to that.
Well, I think when confronted with that sort of choice of increasing debt or providing more social care, if you're in receipt of social care, then obviously you'd want more money spent on social care. But one of the things we've got to be clear about it is, are we going to leave more debt to our, not just our children or grandchildren, but our great-grandchildren? And I think that is something that we can't simply pass the debt on to future generations. And what will they do when they're old if we haven't resolved this problem? They'd increase the debt, but again, the debt might not be able to be increased because it might be too great at that stage. So what we really do need to do is find a sustainable model for social care and health care, and actually make sure that we're providing the best possible for that sustainable model and delivering it for the future. And key to that has got to be investing more in preventative functions rather than waiting until people need actual intervention.
And just finally, perhaps I could put you, social affairs expert Peter Beresford, who technically, as long as that technology holds up, we're hoping to speak to in the programme. He says you're not being you're really not facing this crisis head on. You're not sort of being blunt enough about it, I suppose, to summarise what he's saying. What's your reaction?
Well, I think we are being blunt. We're highlighting the fact that there's going to be this massive shortfall of funds. How do we address those funds? We are lobbying central government to make sure they understand. But at the same time, we're actually investing in new technology to provide better facilities and better outcomes for residents. So it's a mixture of the two. There's no point in just standing here and saying, we need more money, we need more funds. We've got to use those funds in the most efficient way possible so that all residents get the best value for money for themselves.
Councillor Ian Hudspeth, the leader of Warwickshire County Council and chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board of the Local Government Association, whose consultation has been running from July through to midnight this evening. In a few moments' time, we'll be trying to get back in touch with Dr. Eileen Burns, but for the moment, we go to the newsroom and our reporter, Tim Matthews.
A childcare student is interested in being elected to the new Welsh Youth Parliament to give carers a voice, the BBC reported. Teenager Meg Escott is a carer for her grandmother with dementia, also her mother, who has mobility issues and epilepsy, and her younger brother, who also has epilepsy. Next week, young people will be able to apply to stand as a candidate. They could become one of 60 members attempting to influence the Welsh Assembly on issues they care about. The Youth Parliament election will take place in November, with 40 of the 60 members elected by young people across Wales to represent their constituency, to give a voice to young carers like Meg. The Youth Parliament will discuss ideas and offer feedback to the elected adults in Cardiff Bay. Carers for people with cancer are between 5 and 7 times more likely to have mental health problems than the general population, according to a landmark new study funded by Dimbleby Cancer Care. The lead author, Gun Grant, Professor of Palliative Care at the University of Manchester, retrospectively measured carers' psychological health and general health during the patient's last 3 months of life. The survey revealed psychological morbidity was substantially higher among carers than the general population. Overall carers' general health scores were lower than population scores, and female carers had worse psychological morbidity and general health than male carers. Professor Gun Gran said, "We were aware that carers' psychological health suffers when caring for the terminally ill, but we were surprised at the sheer scale of the problem." A report from the Guardian newspaper says that the one thing carers would value above all else is a holiday. Hazel Brown, head of carers services at the Liverpool charity Local Solutions, agrees. Brown, who's cared for carers for 21 years, knows more than most about the pressures they're under. It's physically and emotionally demanding work, she says. Research from Carers UK shows 40% of carers have not had a break in over a year. Well, in May 2016, Brown decided to do something about it. She asked the city's hotels, restaurants and other leisure organisations if they'd be prepared to donate their services to Liverpool's 54,000 carers. The first person to respond to her request happened to be a carer who quickly offered free bed and breakfast to a carer and a guest on a monthly basis. Hotels, restaurants and theatres quickly followed, and thus Hazel Brown's My Time initiative was born. She plans to take the My Time scheme nationwide and will let you know her progress. And now back to Tom.
Thanks, Tim. Much appreciated for the news. And earlier on in the programme on Carers World Live, that's who you're listening to at the moment, we were hoping to hear from Dr. Eileen Burns, consultant physician and president of the British Geriatric Society. I'm pleased to say, and I am crossing my fingers here, that the technical issue's been resolved with her interview. She told me a little bit before the programme about her views on the current state of play of the adult health and social care system.
Users of the health service are older people, or at least it hasn't recognised that to the extent that it really needs to. And in terms of the social care system, well, we know that a lot of money was taken out of the social care system. The government has, in the last year or so, given some money back, but the system is hugely underfunded. And that's really limited what social care is able to do, both in terms of what it can deliver for individuals, but also thinking about the kind of broader range of how it might operate. So I think both components of the system are really under a lot of strain, and everyone who's involved in the care, particularly of older people, but I think anyone with complex needs would recognise that health and social care really need to be both working very closely together, if not in an integrated way, to deliver the best for our patients and service users.
Our viewers at Carers World Radio probably won't be surprised to hear what you have to say about money, but they might feel somewhat surprised that the National Health Service and those connected with social care haven't woken up to the reality.
So at the moment, the government is developing its plan for the next 10 years of the NHS, and that's open for engagement, as they're describing it. So people, individuals, as well as organisations, can go on the website, the NHS England website. It's called the Long-Term Plan, and people can put comments on there. So if people feel strongly about how things should be developing, that's a real opportunity to get your voice heard there. There are many of us who are saying that the future has to be more around recognising the needs of frail older people, thinking about how we can help people to stay well as we all age, so helping us to reduce our risk of becoming frail or having problems in older age, and helping us to manage the long-term conditions we may have, but really thinking differently about both prevention and also supporting people to make sure we're giving them the best possible care if they are living with frailty, if they are older and got multiple problems or complex problems.
Elsewhere in the programme, Councillor Ian Hudspeth of the Local Government Association has been very keen to say that health and social care should basically come together and work as a fluid system, perhaps together. You've mentioned the consultation on the NHS plan, and I'm sure our viewers will be very pleased to hear that. But to what extent are you concerned that the government really hasn't picked up the baton as far as social care is concerned? Because we've been waiting for over a year for a green paper consultation on social care, and even now it still doesn't seem to be anywhere in sight. Does that concern you?
Yeah, that is really a huge concern. So the government have promised that the green paper will appear in the autumn, but we've also been told that the autumn could stretch up. I think people have been slightly tongue-in-cheek when they said this, but I have been told autumn can last until Christmas Eve. I think that even when we get the green paper, that doesn't actually mean action and change. That's a consultative document. And I think one of the problems is that the funding of social care is such a difficult issue. When the Labour Party tried to bring forward so the autumn could stretch up, I think people have been slightly tongue-in-cheek when they said this, but I have been told autumn can last until Christmas Eve. I think that even when we get the green paper, that doesn't actually mean action and change. That's a consultative document. And I think one of the problems is that the funding of social care is such a difficult issue. When the Labour Party tried to bring forward some suggestions for how the funding might be found, that was labelled as a death tax. When the Conservatives tried to bring forward some proposals for a system that was actually slightly better than the system we've got, because most people don't realise how bad the current system of funding social care is, that was labelled a dementia tax. So both main parties have really boxed themselves into a political corner where it's actually quite difficult for them to move forward without, in a way that they can that they can feel is going to be something that we, the general public, will understand and accept. So I think one of the biggest problems around the funding of social care is that many people don't realise at the moment that social care isn't free. Many people assume it's like the health service, that we can expect funding from cradle to grave if we have health and care needs. And of course, when people realise that care is means tested, that if you've got some resources, you lose a huge amount of those resources, it comes as a big shock. So I think it is a difficult problem, but I think that's not an excuse to keep putting off tackling this really important issue.
There's the LGA Green Paper consultation running at the moment until midnight tonight. They've obviously decided to stick their heads above the parapet. Unless the government has a willingness to actually face up to this and be prepared to have the difficult conversation, this is still going to carry on, isn't it? LGA consultation or not?
It is, and I think some of us who've been involved in trying to advise the government can see how difficult the problem is, but at the same time really are quite frustrated that we're not seeing progress. We've had several commissions. We've had the Andrew Dilnut report. We had Kate Barker's commission. We've had a number of previous commissions looking at this and looking at what's the best and the fairest way to fund the system. And yet, people find it, when they reach political power, they seem to find it so difficult to actually move forward with this issue. I think one of the problems is that people don't really want to think about the fact that they may be living with disability in old age, that they may need care. So when we ask people to think about how that should be funded, and should perhaps taxes be raised, whether that be direct taxes or national insurance, people don't really want to engage with that topic because it's not the sort of thing any of us really want to think is going to happen to us. And one of the other big problems in this is that the range of costs that an individual might incur are from nothing at all, if you're lucky enough not to need care in old age, to really catastrophic costs, which in about 1 in 10 cases could be as much as £100,000. Now, for most people, it won't be at that level, but because the difference in costs is so huge, because it's something we don't really like to think about, when people start to talk about taxation or other means of raising money for this subject, it does very quickly become something that people find difficult. But we elect our politicians to deal with difficult issues. We expect them to actually deal with difficult issues. And really, this is something that I think there's no excuse for continuing to prevaricate on. We really do need a solution to this problem, because we know that all around the country, people are really struggling. Local authorities can't afford to provide the care that people need. And so people are really finding it difficult just to do simple everyday tasks like get up, get dressed, get to the toilet. These basic needs we're seeing people all around the country struggling with because we're not funding our social care system properly and fairly.
So in many respects, this is a lack of willingness on the part of government to face up and take those difficult decisions. As you say, MPs are elected to take difficult decisions, well, not all the time necessarily, but to face up to problems and make real progress. Is this, I don't know, the feeling amongst our viewers is that across society, no one's facing up to anything difficult. I mean, let's say just finally, Eileen, if we were talking again in a year's time, what would you hope would be different?
I'd really hope that we'd have a plan that was being enacted, that had become, that we were in the process of seeing bearing fruit, that would actually be a fairer way of funding our health and care system. So our health system, we all pay in through our taxes. We share the risk of having health, incurring health costs. We share that risk and we share that benefit. And we should have the same approach to social care costs. So we really need to think about how we move from where we are now to where we need to be. But I think we'd also want to see the health service moving forward, particularly for older people who've got a number of different conditions and who are perhaps becoming frail, maybe have some problems with memory, that we have a service that meets their needs much more effectively wherever possible within their own home. So we've got more continuity of care for people in their own homes, that we've got access to support when things are starting to go wrong, so that we can perhaps try and help people avoid some of those hospital admissions that sometimes aren't advantageous to them. So if someone perhaps has a fall, or maybe it's becoming a bit difficult for them to get about, that we can access a medical review, some physiotherapy, perhaps some OT and adaptations to help that person to stay at home and manage at home for longer, so that we're actually providing people with the service that they value more, and also providing a more efficient service for the whole system.
Dr. Eileen Burns is a consultant physician and president of the British Geriatric Society. Now on Carers World Radio Plus, here on Carers World Live, we're running a survey of your views and opinions on health and social care, trying to stick to 3 principal questions. Joining me now again is April Morton, our social media coordinator. April, what's going on?
Yeah, so we've got our first question sort of results. They keep coming in, but so far, so for who should fund social care, we have both with tax and private, which is up to 70%, and 30% say actually it should be taxpayers, and actually none yet for it should just be private. So it's really interesting hearing everyone's views, and that's going to run far beyond today. So keep voting, let us hear them. And we've also had some really good comments from people. We've had Alex who's commented saying, put the people first, it shouldn't be a question of money. We've had Margaret, she messaged us saying, no more debt, we're drowning, surely there's another way. And then we've had Timothy saying, everyone should pay more, it's for everyone, hashtag in it for everyone together. So it's really nice to hear that we're hearing your views, and yeah, keep sharing with us, it's really great.
Okay, just to remind you of the questions: who should fund social care, taxpayers, private or a mixture of both? Who should be responsible for getting best value for money on health and social care spending? That's national government, local councils or a mixture of both. And finally, is it more important to reduce the national debt than increase spending on health and social care? 2 straight options, yes or no on that one. You're listening to Carers World Live, broadcasting on carersworldradio.com. We're looking at the subject of the future of adult health and social care. And joining me now on the line is Peter Beresford, who's a social affairs expert. Peter, hopefully you're there. We've had a few technical problems this evening.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
Oh, we can. Loud and clear. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, and I should say that as well as being an academic carrying out research in a university, I'm also myself a long-term user of mental health services and involved in a user-led organisation called Shaping Our Lives. All of us are people who use social care and health services.
So very much academic and well-grounded in the reality.
Hopefully, yeah.
Given that, what's your overall assessment of where we are at the system? How bad is it, or is it just that it's a bit of an illusion?
Well, I've been very impressed by listening to some of your spokespersons, especially the last one. But I must be honest, sitting here listening to this whole programme, it does feel like Groundhog Day. We could be having this conversation in 1997 before the Sutherland Commission, which initially, until it was forced to move away from it, argued for social care that was free at the point of delivery. And I need to be frank about this. I hear what people are phoning in with and suggesting in the survey. Most seems going for a mixture of funding. We are not going to get private funding, except people paying it themselves, whatever their very limited incomes if they're above poverty level. That was made clear with the Dilnot inquiry, where the hope that there would be interest from private insurance companies totally was not realised. I would go back to what was being, I think, implied by Ms. Burns, which is that if we want an integrated system of health and social care, and she's so right, people don't know the difference until the crisis comes, then we have to have a system that can be won. And that means instead of having a health system which is free at the point of delivery, nobody expects you break your arm, go to casualty and get told you can't have it. I watch that marvellous programme 24 Hours in A&E. I see the most wonderful things done there, the most wonderful service by workers in the NHS, and none of that applies for social care. In social care, it's the same as the old poor law. If you've got any money, you've got to pay for it. Meanwhile, the latest evidence from Age UK is that well over 1 million people who have got needs, who should get support, aren't even getting it. We have a catastrophic system. And our spokesperson from the LGA said there's no point standing here saying we need more money. Why not? We must make more efficient use of the money we've got. Does he truly feel that sending people, older people, to hospital because of a crisis caused by the lack of social care, then not be able to get them out again, then sending them again backwards and forwards until they die, is an efficient use of money? I don't think so. I think that governments like this, which are committed to lowering spending on support while reducing taxation for those best equipped to pay for it, are never going to resolve this issue. I think that the Green Paper is an absolute red herring. Perhaps it should be called the Red Herring Paper. I think the only way we are going to get better social care is through a different kind of government. We will wait to an election and have a real chance there. Can we just remember that that phrase that was used tonight, the death tax, was coined in 2010 when Lib Dems and Labour parties both agreed on moving forward, but the Conservatives at the last moment said no and they called it a death tax. And then you may remember that Mrs. May almost lost the last election critically because her proposals, which she quickly junked, were also called a death tax. We need adult leadership for social care, within social care and without it, which dares to say what's necessary to say to power. And we need governments which are less obsessed with their own advancement and their own interests, and more concerned with the rights and interests of the growing numbers of older and disabled people of all ages, I stress, in our society. Who we are has changed, and that means that social care is so much more important even than it's ever been before.
It's interesting that you mentioned in that last comment, it sort of gelled with something that Eileen Burns said. It's not just, the problem is not one just of money, but also the NHS and people thinking of this and policymakers are stuck in the past. So it's not just money, it's an attitude problem as well. How far would you go along with that?
Well, we carried out a major research project supported by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, which was published in a book called Supporting People. It was a development as well as a research project, working with both service users, carers, and also on-the-ground practitioners to find out what people thought person-centred support meant, what was stopping it happening, and how we could move on from that. And it was possible on the ground, even in recent times, to make a load of progress locally. But there were two big problems in the way which acted in a nasty, collusive way with each other. One was the lack of money. And if you haven't got enough money, you can't plan well, you can't invest properly. The second was culture. And what we found out from all those groups, because there was an amazing amount of agreement between face-to-face practitioners, carers, family carers, and service users. What we found out was that the culture of services was often the wrong culture. It was a culture which, we've heard it already tonight, was much more about institutionalizing people, treating people in batches, making it the easier option to be in a home rather than at home, not making it possible for there to be 24-hour round-the-clock support so that people could maintain their lives and live a full and equal life with their families and other relationships. So I think culture is an issue. The cultural issue is one about we need to move to a much more person-centered way of working. And I'm sure that the practitioners want to do that. I don't think government has even got as far as thinking about those sorts of things, because there is this kind of, well, if we put social care into the context of welfare reform, it really is. And I talk a lot to welfare rights workers, to social workers working with older and disabled people. There's no doubt the culture of welfare reform is these people are imposters. These people who are receiving benefits should not be receiving them. They haven't really got impairments. There's nothing wrong with them. And we know that on appeal, so many of those cases are reversed. There are some terrible cruelties going on. And of course, you can't have a decent social care system without it connecting properly and equally with health and also with welfare services. And welfare reform, I want to say, is utterly pernicious in our society. And I think that needs to be said. And we can't have a serious and adult conversation about social care without highlighting what's really bad. And it's been cross-party bad, cross-governments bad about welfare reform. And we know now that people are beginning to realise that. But I really thought that what Ms. Burns had to say was so true, that most of us we're just getting on with our lives. And these are difficult times for many people. And we don't necessarily have the time to be able to make sense of different policies like social care and health, to know that they're actually different, to know that the rules of engagement are very different, to know that we won't qualify even if we think we will. And that's very sad. I'd like to see a social care system that bears some resemblance to the brilliance that we can still see, even in these difficult times, of much of the voluntary sector end-of-life care. You know, where you see terrific palliative care social workers and teams of other professionals working together, health and social care needs together, taking account of income matters, because so many difficult things can happen if your life becomes limited. And then if you're facing bereavement. And there are so many terrific models and pioneering activities going on. But I do think, I'm sorry to talk so much, I do think I think we are owed a bit more by the leadership of social care. And the system we have now is this, that we have so-called eligibility criteria or their equivalent, but we have financial limits. And always the eligibility criteria adjust to fit the financial limit. So as there's less and less money, you're less and less likely to be seen to qualify as needing help. What Colin Slasberg and I have suggested to the LGA and to others is that what we need is to record all that unmet need, because otherwise, talk about how much money is the shortfall and the rest is all and can be dismissed as such by government as estimates and guesstimates. We need to have a log of who's asking and needing rightfully support and isn't getting it. And it looks at the moment that's an awful lot of people, but we need evidence. And I think ordinary people and the progressive media, when they see that evidence, will think, hang on a moment, if we are claiming to be a civilized society, we can't go on like this anymore. We can't go on with this sort of desperate attempt to mend and find little devices to keep things at bay. We have a major problem with social care, which is damaging health, damaging our population. It's got to change.
Finally, Peter, perhaps I could just put this idea to you. On Carers World Radio Plus some time ago, I interviewed one of the deputy leaders in the Welsh Government, the Welsh Assembly. And one of the things she said to me was the makeup of the Parliament is different. It's lots of people from the voluntary sector who are very grounded. There tends to be less party political divisions. Do you think our politicians are so locked up in the party system in the English government that they really could learn something from the Welsh government and the background and maybe create a more socially just system, in your view? What do you think?
I don't think I have to be honest. I don't think it's just about party politics. I think it's about a deep-rooted ideology that's been in existence since the times of Mrs. Thatcher, which said, for profit is good, the state is bad, support people in their lives, you create dependency, make people earn money and stop taking money from earners. And since then, it's got worse and worse, this division of us into strivers and scroungers and the rest of it. I think that is really so much bunkum. I think there's a pernicious ideology around now which has confused people so that we have enormous corporations that accept no responsibility, the Googles and Amazons of the world that pay the equivalent of us paying tuppence tax a week. and it can't be good. We have high streets being destroyed so that older people can't get out to them. All this, these are really integrated and connected issues, and they worry me enormously for the future of our society. For my children, my grandchildren, and as has been said, even for great-grandchildren, we can't go on like this. We are in a changing world. Looking after each other is what this is all about. And we need to find ways of looking after each other which are decent, which are respectful, which are inclusive, and which encourage equality. And we've moved so far away from that. I mean, there were lots of things wrong with the welfare state that was created after the war. It was top-down. And the work I've done about the welfare state, what it highlights is actually the welfare state began to change, began to be much more participatory. But look at social care, which is so dependent on the private sector. It's such an underdeveloped market. It's so lacking in choice. It's based so much on the most risky sorts of economics and funding schemes, so that hundreds of people at a drop of a hat can lose their home. This is not the way to proceed. We need a radical rethink. We need a government with guts, and we need social care leaders who are prepared to tell them what they need to be told.
You mentioned Amazon, of course. They're not here to defend themselves. I must say that. Just very finely and very briefly. In a year from now, as I said to Eileen, how do you think you're going to feel? More positive, more negative, or similar?
I think it all depends on the results of any forthcoming election. I mean, we have politics at the moment that are so diverted by internal wrangles that I feel that we're sitting on our hands. But I would want to say one thing. One of the great developments in recent years, and I'm involved in it in a very small way, is the emergence of organisations of carers at local level and the emergence of organisations of service users and patients. Yet, what's most disturbing is that the evidence is showing that those are the kinds of voluntary organisations that are most at risk now and are folding, are disappearing, and yet those big charities, which I think many of us are becoming a bit worried about, seem nonetheless to be maintaining their position, although it's sometimes not clear how helpful that is. So we need spokespersons for users and carers, for service users, carers and patients, but those spokesperson organisations, which have been a wonderful departure from old kinds of charity, are sadly increasingly apparently at risk, and we must do something about that.
Peter Beresford, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Carers World Live. Lots of fascinating thoughts which we'll follow up with you another time. Thanks again, Peter. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
You're listening to Carers World Live on carersworldradio.com. April Morton, our social media coordinator, I want to say social affairs coordinator, but I mean social media coordinator, is with us now. And the second question, who should be responsible for getting best value for money on health and social care spending? How's it looking?
Yeah, it's looking really good at the moment. We've got 80% who say it actually should be both national and local, and also that we've got 20% who say it actually should be national government who should go for it. So it's really good to hear your views. Again, the survey continues all throughout, sort of continuing past the day, so keep voting. And we've had some really nice comments in. We've had Richard, who actually said that social care needs to fix the criteria. It's too hard to qualify now. Hashtag carers first. So he sounds, hopefully we'll be able to fix that. And local Lucy message saying that she feels like the support from workers and other carers is amazing and that they're all strong together. And Matt, who feels that the local and national government should be responsible, and he thinks that they should work together to hopefully be able to help everyone out. So it's really good to hear your views, so keep it coming, and can't wait to see more.
And there'll be details on our website of how you can continue joining in that survey, which effectively we will be running for an indefinite period, certainly as long as we wait for the government's long-awaited green paper. We'll come back to April in a minute for the third question, which is possibly the political ideology question. But now let's hear our final carer story from Josie.
At the moment, I get 3 short visits a day from a care worker to cook my meals, help me shower and keep the house clean. I get 2 hours every 2 weeks, social time, which at best on a good day gets me over to the park and back. It's not long enough to join in any activities, but I value this time hugely as it's uninterrupted time with actual real conversation, not just what do you need to eat or similar. My basic needs are met, I'm clean and I'm fed, but I haven't got enough support to actually get me out of the house. It means that some days I barely get to speak to anyone, let alone have a social life. If I get an infection and have to ask my carer to pick up a prescription, I don't get to have a shower that day. There just isn't enough time. A little more support, for example, a support worker to go with me to new places, would give me so much more opportunity to take part in life, but at the moment that feels like an impossible utopia. People like me who are professionals and could make a contribution with the right support are being cut out of the workforce. Working in an office or a hospital isn't really possible for me, but I still have skills and experience that I would like to use if I had the means of doing so. In the end, it is a question of equality. I don't feel like I'm living, just existing.
Josie summarising the thoughts of many of our viewers tonight. You're listening to Carers World Live. Just a final word on the survey at the moment. The third question: is it more important to reduce the national debt than increase spending on health and social care? April Morton, how are we getting on?
We're getting on really great. It seems to be almost an overwhelming amount who says actually we need to focus on health and social care, and that even though the debt will rise, actually health and social care is really important. We need to focus on actually our people. So it's really nice to hear all your views. We've had a few comments. We've had Louisa whose message saying let's all work together. We need to focus on supporting social care and all those involved. We've had Giles who's texted in. He said actually no more debt. Is there not another way? Can't we figure it out? So it's really great to hear your views, and yeah, the survey will keep running, so keep voting in because it's great to hear from you.
Thanks, April, for keeping an eye across social media. Well, that's about it for this edition of Carers World Live. My thanks to all of our contributors, to our production team, and lastly, but definitely not least, you for joining in the debate. We hope this edition of Carers World Live has been thought-provoking and that you'll continue to let us know your views. Join in the survey and the debate. See you again next month on Carers World Radio Plus, broadcasting on carersworldradio.com, where your views are our news.